Vasishta's Yoga, Part 4 on Sustenance, the story of Bhīma, Bhāsa, and Dṛḍha. Vasishta continued, O Rama, after Sambara had been deserted by the three demons, Dama, Vyala, and Kata, he realized that they had foolishly entertained egoistic notions and had thus come to grief. Hence, he resolved to create more demons, but this time with self-knowledge and wisdom, so that they might not fall into the same trap of ego sense. Sambara thereupon created by his own magic power three more demons known as Bhīma, Bhāsa, and Dṛḍha. They were omniscient. They were endowed with self-knowledge. They were full of dispassion and sinless. They regarded the whole universe as of no more value than a blade of grass. They began to fight with the army of the gods. In spite of fighting for a considerable time, the ego sense did not arise in them. Whenever the ego sense raised its head, they subdued it with the self-inquiry, Who am I? They were therefore free from fear of death, devoted to appropriate action in the present, free from all attachment, devoid of the feeling I did this, intent on doing the work allotted to them by the master Sambara, free from desire and from aversion and endowed with equal vision. The army of the gods was quickly defeated by them. The gods fled to Lord Vishnu for refuge. At his command, they took up their abode in another region. After this, Lord Vishnu himself had to fight with the demon Sambara. Slain by the Lord, the demon instantly reached the abode of Vishnu. Lord Vishnu also liberated the three demons, Bhīma, Bhāsa, and Dṛḍha, who, when the body fell, became enlightened, as they had no ego sense. O Rama, the conditioned mind alone is bondage, and liberation is when the mind is unconditioned. The conditioning of the mind drops away when the truth is clearly seen and realized, and when the conditioning has ceased, one's consciousness is made supremely peaceful, as when the flame of lamp is put out. To realize that the self alone is all this, whatever one may think of anywhere, is clear perception. Conditioning and mind are but words without corresponding truth. When the truth is investigated, they cease to be meaningful. This is clear perception. When this clear perception arises, there is liberation. Dama, Vyala, and Kata illustrate the mind that is conditioned by the ego sense. Bhīma, Bhāsa, and Dṛḍha illustrate the mind that is free from conditioning or ego sense. O Rama, do not be like the former, but be like the latter. That is the reason why I narrated this story to you, my dear and highly intelligent disciple. Vasishta continued, O Rama, they are the true heroes who have brought under control the mind which is dominated by ignorance and delusion. Such control of the mind is the only way by which one can remedy the sufferings of this world appearance, or the cycle of birth and death, and the endless chain of tragedy. I shall declare to you the quintessence of all wisdom. Listen and let it perfume your whole life. Bondage is a craving for pleasure, and its abandonment is liberation. Hence, look upon all the pleasure centers in this world as poison fumes. Blind abandonment is undesirable. Inquire deeply and seriously into the nature of sense pleasures and abandon all craving for them. Then you can live happily. By the cultivation of auspicious qualities, as all wrong knowledge gradually ceases, the mind becomes desireless, free from the pairs of opposites, restlessness, fear, and delusion. Thereby the mind rests in a state of peace and bliss. It is then unpolluted by the ego sense, evil thoughts and feelings, attachment and sorrow. Then the mind gets rid of its violent son, known as doubt, and its wife, known as craving. Ironically, the awakened mind brings about the cessation of those very things, like thoughts and desires, which promoted its growth. The awakened mind brings about the stoppage or the cessation of thoughts and desires, which promoted the growth of the mind. Pursuing this inquiry into its real nature, the mind abandons its identification even with the body. The ignorant mind expands, but on the awakening of wisdom, the same mind ceases to be mind. Mind alone is this universe. Mind is the mountain range. Mind is the space. Mind is God. Mind alone is friend and foe. When the consciousness forgets itself and undergoes modification and psychological conditioning, it is known as the mind, which gives rise to birth and death. This is known as Jiva. being that part of the infinite consciousness which has assumed the character of an object of this consciousness, just a little enveloped by the psychological conditioning. It is this jiva that moves away from the truth of the infinite consciousness and by sinking deeper and deeper into the conditioning becomes involved in the world experience. Of course, the self is neither the jiva nor the body nor its components. The self is like space, independent of all these. Vasishta continued, O Rama, the mind itself is the jiva. The mind experiences what it itself has projected out of itself. By that it is bound. It is the state of the mind that determines the nature of reincarnation of the jiva. One who wishes to be king dreams that he has become king. What one intensely wishes for, he obtains sooner or later. If the mind is impure, its effects are also impure. If it is pure, its products are pure too. The noble man engages himself in noble spiritual pursuits even in straitened circumstances. There is neither bondage nor liberation in truth. The infinite thinks, I am the body, and this thought acts as bondage. When one realizes that all these are false, he shines as the infinite consciousness. When the mind has been purified by pure thoughts and actions, it takes on the nature of the infinite, even as a pure cloth takes on a color easily. When in a pure mind there arises concept and notions of body, scriptural knowledge and dispassion, etc., the world appearance comes into being. So the world appearance owes its existence to the concepts and notions of such gross things as body and such subtle things as scriptural knowledge and dispassion also. When in a pure mind there arise concepts and notions of a body, scriptural knowledge and dispassion, etc., the world appearance comes into being. When the mind gets involved in the external objective universe, it moves away from the self. When the mind gives up the subject-object relationship it has with the world, it is instantly absorbed in the infinite. The mind has no existence apart from the infinite consciousness. It did not exist in the beginning, it will not exist in the end, and so it does not now. One who thinks that it does exist holds sorrow in his own hand. He who knows that this world is the self in reality goes beyond that sorrow, and this world gives him both joy and liberation. The mind is nothing but ideas and notions. Who will grieve when such a mind comes to an end? The reality is consciousness, which is the middle between the seer and the object. This reality is veiled by the mind and revealed when the mind ceases. When the mind's conditioning ceases, then ignorance, craving, desires, aversions, delusion, stupidity, fear, ideations come to an end. Purity, auspiciousness, and goodness arise. One enjoys the delight of self-knowledge. He who has an intelligence that has rendered pure by the destruction of all the inner purities has his heart illumined by the light of the self obtained through inquiry into the self. Seeing the worthlessness of birth and death, he dwells without fear or anxiety in the city which is the body. Rama asked, Lord, the infinite consciousness is transcendental. Please tell me how this universe exists in it. Vasishta replied, This universe exists in the infinite consciousness just as the future waves exist in a calm sea, non-different in truth but with the potentiality of an apparent difference. The infinite consciousness is unmanifest, though omnipresent, even as space, though existing everywhere, is unmanifest. Just as the reflection of an object in crystal can be said to be neither real nor entirely unreal, one cannot say that this universe which is reflected in the infinite consciousness is real nor unreal. Again, just as space is unaffected by the clouds that float in it, this infinite consciousness is unaffected and untouched by the universe that appears in it. Just as light is not seen except through the refracting agent, even so the finite consciousness is revealed through these various bodies. It is essentially nameless and formless, but names and forms are ascribed to its reflections. Consciousness reflecting in consciousness shines as consciousness and exists as consciousness. Yet, to one who is ignorant, though considering oneself as wise and rational, there arises the notion that there has come into being and there exists something other than the consciousness. To the ignorant, this consciousness appears as the terrible world appearance. To the wise, the same consciousness appears as the oneself. This consciousness alone is known as pure experiencing, and it is thanks to it that the sun shines and all beings enjoy life here. This consciousness is not created nor does it perish. It is eternal and the world appearance is superimposed on it, even as waves in relation to the ocean. In that consciousness, when it is reflected within itself, there arises the I am notion, which gives rise to diversity. As space, the same consciousness enables the seed to sprout. As air, it draws the sprout, as it were; as water, it nourishes it; as earth, it stabilizes it; and as light, the consciousness itself reveals the new life. It is the consciousness in the seed that in due course manifests as the fruit. This consciousness alone is the different seasons and their characteristics. It is on account of this consciousness that the entire universe exists, as it does, supporting an infinite number of beings, till the time of the cosmic dissolution. Vasishta continued, thus, this world appearance comes and goes as the very nature of the infinite consciousness. Being non-different from the infinite consciousness, the world appearance has a mutual causal relationship with it, arises in it, exists in it, and is absorbed in it. Though, like the deep ocean, it is not agitated, yet it is agitated like the waves appearing on the surface. Even as one who is intoxicated sees himself as another person, this consciousness, becoming conscious of itself, considers itself as another. This universe is not real, nor is it unreal. It exists in consciousness, yet it does not exist independently of consciousness. Though appearing to be an addition to consciousness, it does not exceed consciousness. The relationship is like ornaments in gold. The self, the supreme Brahman, which permeates everything, is that which enables you to experience sound, taste, form, and fragrance. O Rama, it is transcendental and omnipresent. It is non-dual and pure. In it there is not even a notion of another. All these diversities, like existence and non-existence, good and evil, are vainly imagined by ignorant people. It matters not whether this imagination is said to be based on the not-self or the self itself. Since there is nothing other than the self, how can there be desire for another? Hence, notions like this is desirable and this is undesirable do not touch the self. Since the self is desireless and because the doer and the action itself are also non-dual, it does not get involved in the action. Since that which exists and that in which it exists are identical, one cannot even say it is. Since in it there is no desire whatsoever, there is no notion of inaction in it. There is nothing else, Rama. You are the very existence of this absolute Brahman. Therefore, free yourself from all notions of duality and live an active life. What have you to gain by doing all kinds of actions again and again? And what will you gain by desiring to be inactive, or by adhering to scriptures? Rest in peace and purity like the ocean when it is not agitated by wind. That self by which everything is completely permeated is not to be gained by traveling far and wide. Do not let your mind wander among the objects of the world. You yourself are the Supreme Self, the infinite consciousness. You are nothing else. Vasishta continued, O Rama, the sense of doership, which gives rise to both happiness and unhappiness, or which gives rise to the state of yoga, is fictitious in the eyes of the wise. To the ignorant, however, it is real. For what is the source of this notion? This notion arises when the mind, spurred by the predisposition, endeavors to gain something. The resultant action is then attributed to oneself. When the same action leads to the experience of its fruition, the notion I enjoy this arises. The two notions are in truth the two faces of the same notion. Whether one is engaged in action or not, whether one is in heaven or in hell, whatever may be the psychological conditioning, that itself is experienced by the mind. Hence, to the ignorant and conditioned person, there is the notion I do this, whether he is doing something or doing nothing. But such a notion does not arise in the enlightened or unconditioned. When the truth concerning this is known, the conditioning is weakened, and thenceforth the wise man, even while acting in this world, is not interested in the fruits of those actions. He lets action happen in his life without attachment to those actions, and whatever be the results of those actions, he regards them as non-different from his own self. but such is not the attitude of one who is immersed in the mental states. Whatever the mind does, that alone is action. Hence, the mind alone is the doer of actions, not the body. The mind alone is this world appearance. The world appearance has arisen in it, and it rests in the mind. When the objects as well as the experiencing mind have become tranquil, consciousness alone remains. The wise declare that the mind of the enlightened is neither in a state of bliss nor devoid of bliss, neither in motion nor static, neither real nor unreal, but between these two propositions. His unconditioned consciousness blissfully plays its role in this world appearance as if it is in a play. Since it is the mental conditioning which determines the nature of action and of the experience, and since it is absent in the enlightened, the latter is ever in bliss. His actions are non-actions. Hence, he does not incur merit nor demerit. His behavior is like that of a child, and even if he appears to be in pain, he is not. He is totally unattached to this world appearance and to the actions of the mind and the senses. He does not even entertain the notion of liberation nor that of bondage. He sees the self and self alone. Vasishta continued, Rama, the absolute Brahman being omnipotent, his infinite potencies appear as the visible universe. All the diverse categories like reality, unreality, unity, diversity, beginning and end exist in the Brahman. Like waves on the sea, the Jiva also appears in Brahman, also limited by individualized consciousness. This Jiva later undergoes progressively denser conditioning, functions in accordance with that conditioning, and experiences the consequences of such action. Rama asked, Lord, Brahman is free from sorrow, and yet that which has emerged from it, as a lamp kindled from another lamp, is the universe which is full of sorrow. How is this possible? Valmiki said. Hearing this question, Vasishta contemplated thus for a while. Obviously, Rama's understanding is not efficient because there is impurity in his mind. Yet, if he is not enabled fully to understand the truth, his mind will not find rest. As long as the mind is swayed by the thoughts of pleasures or happiness, so long is it unable to comprehend the truth. If the mind is pure, then it instantly comprehends the truth. Hence, it is declared that he who declares all this is Brahman to one who is ignorant or half awakened goes to hell. Hence, a wise teacher should encourage his students first to be established in self-control and tranquility. Then the student should be properly examined before the knowledge of the truth is imparted to him. Valmiki to Arishtanemi said, hearing this question from Rama, Vasishta contemplated thus for a while. Obviously, Rama's understanding is not efficient because there is still impurity in his mind. Yet, if he is not enabled fully to understand the truth, his mind will not find rest. As long as the mind is swayed by thoughts of pleasure, so long is it unable to comprehend the truth. If the mind is pure, then it instantly comprehends the truth. Hence, it is declared that he who declares all this is Brahman to one who is ignorant or half awakened goes to hell. Hence, a wise teacher should encourage his students first to be established in self-control and tranquility. Then the student should be properly examined before the knowledge of the truth is imparted to him. After contemplating thus, Vasishta said, You will discover the truth for yourself whether Brahman is free from sorrow or not, or I shall help you understand this in course of time. For the present, understand this. Brahman is omnipotent, omnipresent, and the indwelling presence in all. This Brahman, through the indescribable power known as Maya, has brought this creation into being. This Maya is capable of making the unreal appear as the real and vice versa, even as the empty void of space appears to be blue in color. Behold, Rama, you see such infinite diversity of creatures in this world itself. That is the manifestation of the infinite potencies of the Lord. Embrace tranquility. He who is at peace within himself beholds the truth. When the mind is not at peace, the world appears to be a confusion of diversity. But in fact, the universe is an apparent manifestation of the infinite potencies of the Lord. Just as where there is light, there is natural visibility, even so, on account of the omnipotence of the Lord, this world appearance has arisen as His very nature. However, simultaneously with this world appearance, ignorance has also come into being, on account of which there is sorrow. Give up this ignorance and be free. Vasishta continued, O Rama, this entire creation of world appearance is but an accidental manifestation of the intention of the omnipotent conscious energy, Chit Shakti, of the infinite consciousness or Brahman. The intention itself condenses and thus gives rise in the mind to the substance thus intended. Immediately, this mind reproduces the substance as if in the objective field. At this stage, there is a notion of this creation having factually abandoned its fundamental and true nature as the infinite consciousness. This infinite consciousness apparently sees within itself a pure void, and the conscious energy Chit Shakti thereupon brings space into existence. In that conscious energy, there arises an intention to diversify. This intention itself is then regarded as the creator Brahma, with his retinue of other living creatures. Thus have all the 14 worlds appeared in the space of infinite consciousness, with their endless variety of beings, some immersed in dense darkness, some very close to enlightenment, and others fully enlightened. In this world, among the many species of living beings, only the human beings are fit to be instructed into the nature of truth. Even among these human beings, many are obsessed by sorrow and delusion, hate and fear. All this I shall presently deal with in great detail. But all this talk about who created this world, how it was created, is intended only for the purpose of composing scriptures and expounding them. It is not based on truth. Modifications arising in the infinite consciousness or organization of the cosmic being do not really take place in the Lord, though they appear to do so. There is nothing but the infinite consciousness, even in imagination. To think of that being the creator and the universe as the created is absurd. When one lamp is kindled from another, there is no creature-creature relationship between them. Fire is one. Creation is just a word. It has no corresponding substantial reality. Consciousness is Brahman. Brahman alone is the substance. Sound or word is Brahman, and Brahman alone is the component of all substances. All indeed is Brahman. There is no world in reality. Just as when the dirt is removed, the real substance is made manifest. Just as when the darkness of the night is dispelled, the objects that were shrouded by the darkness are clearly seen. Even so, when ignorance is dispelled, truth is realized. Rama asked, Lord, how could there be even an intention to diversify in the infinite consciousness? Vasishta said, O Rama, there is no contradiction in my statements. You will see the beauty of the truth in my statements when you attain the vision of truth. Descriptions of creation, etc., are given in the scriptures for the purpose of instructing disciples. Do not let your mind be colored by them. When you realize that which is indicated by the words, then naturally you will abandon the jugglery of words. In the infinite consciousness itself, there is neither an intention nor the veil of delusion, but that itself is before you as the world. This can be realized only when ignorance comes to an end. Ignorance will not cease except with the help of instructions which rests in the use of those words and descriptions. This ignorance seeks to destroy itself and hence seeks the light of true knowledge. Weapons are destroyed by other weapons, dirt cleans dirt, poison cures poison, and enemies are destroyed by other enemies. Even so, this Maya rejoices when it is destroyed. The moment you become aware of this Maya, it vanishes. The ignorance or Maya veils the truth and creates this diversity. But it does not know its own true nature, and that is strange. As long as one does not inquire into its nature, it rules. The moment there is inquiry into the Maya, it ceases. The Maya does not exist in truth. So long as this truth is not directly experienced by you, you will have to accept my word for it. He who knows that Brahman alone is the truth, he is liberated. All other points of view are intended to bind a a person to ignorance. This ignorance will not go away without self-knowledge, and self-knowledge arises only when the scriptures are studied deeply. Whatever may be the origin of this ignorance, surely even that exists in the self. Hence, do not inquire into how has this ignorance arisen, but inquire into how shall I get rid of it. When this ignorance or maya has ceased to be, then you shall know how it arose. You will realize that this ignorance is not a real entity, it arises only in a state of unwisdom. Not a single person, whether he is a great scholar or a hero, has been spared by this ignorance. This ignorance is the source of all sorrow. Uproot it and destroy it. Vasishta continued, I shall again declare to you the way in which the one infinite consciousness has come to appear as the jiva and all the rest of it. You see in the ocean that it is tranquil in places and agitated in other places. Even so, the infinite consciousness seems to embrace diversity in some places, though it in itself is non-dual. It is natural for the omnipotent infinite consciousness to manifest in all its infinite glory. This manifestation of the omnipotence of infinite consciousness enters into an alliance with time, space, and causation, which are indispensable to the manifestation. Thence arose the infinite names and forms. But all these apparent manifestations are in reality non-different from the infinite consciousness. That aspect of this infinite consciousness which relate itself to the manifestation of the names and forms and thus to time, space, and causation is known as the knower of the field or the witness consciousness. The body is the field. That which knows this field inside out and in all its aspect is the knower of the field or witness consciousness. This witness consciousness becomes involved in the latent predispositions and develops the ego sense. When this ego sense generates notions and intentions within itself, it is known as the intellect. As a thinking instrument, it is known as the mind. When the intelligence gets further modified or perverted, it becomes the senses. All of these constitute the body. Just as a fruit undergoes various changes in size, color, etc., as it matures, the same consciousness undergoes these apparent changes as the ignorance grows deeper and denser. The foolish person then abandons all right thinking or inquiry into the truth and voluntarily embraces ignorance as bliss. Caught in its own trap of various activities and of identification of oneself as a doer, he undergoes endless suffering, which is self-imposed and self-willed. O Rama, in this world the cause of all misfortunes is only the mind, which is full of sorrow and grief, desire and delusion. Forgetful of self-knowledge, it generates desire and anger, evil thoughts and cravings which throw the person into the fire of sense objects. O Rama, rescue this mind from the mire of ignorance. O Rama, he indeed is a demon in human form who is not distressed by the impure state of the mind caused by alternating good and evil thoughts and who is subjected to old age, death and despair. Vasishta continued, this incidental manifestation of the power of the infinite consciousness appears as the millions of species of beings in this universe. These countless beings are caught up in their own mental conditioning. They are found in every country and in every place in the universe, and they are in every conceivable kind of situation. Some of them are part of this new creation in this epoch, others are more ancient. Some have incarnated just a couple of times, others have had countless incarnations. Some are liberated, others are sunk in dreadful suffering. Some are celestials, some are demigods, and others are the deities presiding over this manifest universe. Some others are demons, others are goblins. Some are members of the four castes of human beings, and others are members of primitive uncivilized tribes. Some of them are in the form of herbs and grass, others appear as roots, fruits, and leaves. Some are in the form of creepers, and some are living as flowers. Some are the kings and their ministers clad in royal robes, others are clad in rags and bark of trees, either because they are anchorites or they are beggars. Some are snakes and others are insects. Others are animals like lions and tigers, etc. Some are birds, others are elephants and donkeys. Some are prosperous, others are in adverse circumstances. Some are in heaven, others are in hell. Some are in the region of the stars, others are in holes of dying trees. Some live amongst liberated sages, others are already liberated sages who have risen above body consciousness. Some are endowed with enlightened intelligence, some are extremely dull. Just as in this universe there are countless beings of various species, in other universes too there are similar beings with different bodies suited to those universes. But all of them are bound by their own mental conditioning. These beings roam this universe, sometimes uplifted, sometimes degraded, and death plays with them as with a ball. Bound to their own countless desires and attachments and limited by their own mental conditioning, they migrate from one body to another. They will continue to do so till they perceive the truth concerning their own self, which is infinite consciousness. After attaining this self-knowledge, they are liberated from delusion, and they do not return to this plane of birth and death anymore. Vasishta continued. However, all this creation takes place only as in a dream. This creation is not real, it merely appears to be so. He who has eradicated ignorance totally, and in whom every form of conditioning has ceased, is a liberated sage. Though he seems to be aware of this dream known as the world appearance, in reality he does not see it as the world. This world appearance is naturally conceived of in all the jivas at all times, till the jiva attains liberation. In every jiva, therefore, the body exists potentially, and not in all its physical substantiality, but as a thought and as an intention. I shall describe to you once again how the Creator Brahma arose in the infinite consciousness, and you will see from that account how the infinite beings arose similarly in that consciousness. The infinite consciousness, which is devoid of time, space, and causation, playfully assumes these. Thus, the cosmic person comes into being. This cosmic person is also the cosmic mind and cosmic life. This cosmic person intends to experience sound, and space is brought into being. With the transmission of sound as its character, it intends to experience touch. Air is created. These are unseen and subtle. Wishing to see, this cosmic person brings fire into being, and this fire expands into the numerous sources of light. It intends to experience taste as well as coolness to counteract fire. Water comes into being. And lastly, by its mere wish to smell, earth with its faculty of smell comes into being. This cosmic person with all its faculties is still extremely subtle and undivided. It apparently abandons that and perceives itself as infinite sparks in space. It thinks of itself as each one of these sparks. The ego sense arises. This ego sense also has intelligence inherent in it, and it conceives of a body for itself with the help of the five cosmic elements I have already mentioned. The body it regards as gross, physical, and material, and so it becomes. This cosmic person is the Brahma. He appears to create all these countless beings, and he himself protects them. He first arose in the infinite consciousness, but apparently overcome by self-limitation and forgetfulness of the infinite nature, as in fetal sleep, he identifies himself with the body. Fueled and maintained by the life force, prana, and composed of material substances. When he begins to inquire into his origin, his true nature is revealed to him, and he is liberated from self-limitation. Vasishta continued, O Rama, though this universe seems to exist, nothing really exists as the universe. It is but the appearance or reflection of the infinite consciousness, which alone is the reality. In that consciousness, the creation appears as if in a dream. Hence, only the reality in which it appears is real, and that is the infinite void. You see the world because the eyes perceive the world. And in the same way, if you think or believe or know that it exists, that is because your mind thinks so. And that mind has brought this body into being for its own dwelling. All the powers that are inherent in the mind and by which this world has been brought into being are found in the infinite consciousness. Hence, the sages have declared that the mind is omnipotent. All these gods, demons, and humans have all been conjured up by the mind. When the mind ceases to entertain such notions, they shall cease to be, even as a lamp without fuel. The wise man who knows that all the objects in the world are unreal does not consider them objects of pleasure to be pursued. He who runs after the objects created by his own mind surely comes to grief. This world appearance has come into being on account of desire. It will cease only when desire ceases to arise, not when you turn against it or hate it. When this world appearance has been dissolved, nothing whatsoever has really been destroyed. If an unreal appearance has vanished, what does one lose? If it is utterly unreal, then how can it even be destroyed? And why does one grieve over the unreal loss? Or if it were real, then no one could destroy it or make it unreal. From this point of view, this world is nothing but Brahman, the eternal truth, in which case is there any room for sorrow at all? Similarly, that which is unreal cannot grow or flourish. For what does one rejoice? What does one desire then? When all this is indeed the one infinite consciousness, what does one renounce? That which was non-existent in the beginning and that which shall cease to be in the end is not real in the middle. That which exists in the beginning and in the end is the reality is in the present too. See that all this is unreal, including myself or the individual self, and there will be no sorrow in you. Or see that all this is real, including myself, and sorrow will not touch you either. As the sage said this, the ninth day came to an end, and the assembly dispersed. Vasishta continued, knowing that the entire universe, including one's wealth, wife, son, etc., are nothing but the creation of the jugglery of the mind, one does not grieve when they are lost, nor does one feel elated when they prosper. On the other hand, it may be proper to feel unhappy when they prosper, for such prosperity may intensify one's ignorance. Hence, that which generates attachment and craving in the fool generates detachment and cool indifference in the wise. The nature of the wise person is not to desire those experiences which one does not effortlessly obtain, and to experience those which have already arrived. If one is able to wean the mind away from craving for sense pleasures by whatever means, one is saved from being drowned in the ocean of delusion. He who has realized his oneness with the entire universe and who has thus risen above both desire for and desire against is never deluded. Therefore, O Rama, realize that self or infinite consciousness which permeates and therefore transcends both the unreal and the real, and then neither grasp nor give up whatever is inside or outside. The wise sage who is established in such self-knowledge is free from any sort of coloring or mental conditioning or self-limitation. He is like the sky or space which is totally free from being tainted by anything that happens within it. That your mind not entertain a feeling of mindness in any of the objects of the senses. Then whether you are active or inactive, you will not be sunk in the mire of ignorance. When your heart does not taste sense pleasures as sweet and desirable, then you have known all that there is to be known, and you are saved from this cycle of birth and death. He who is not attracted by the pleasures of either this world or of heaven is liberated, even if he does not specifically desire or strive for such liberation. O Rama, in this ocean of ignorant mental conditioning, he who has found the raft of self-knowledge is saved from drowning. He who has not found that raft is surely drowned. Therefore, examine the nature of the self with an intelligence as sharp as the razor's edge, and then rest established in self-knowledge. Live as the sages of self-knowledge live. They know the infinite consciousness in the world appearance. Hence, they do not relish nor renounce activity in this world. You too have attained self-knowledge, and you are at peace. Vasishta continued, O Rama, in the past there have been millions of Brahmas, Shivas, Indras, and Narayanas. However, even the creation of these gods were but the jugglery of Maya. These creations were sometimes from Brahma, others were ascribed to Shiva or Narayana, or the sages. Again, sometimes Brahma was born of a lotus, at others he rose from the waters or from an egg or from space. In some universes, Brahma is the supreme deity, in others it is the sun, Indra, Narayana, or Shiva. In some universes, the earth is filled with trees, in others with people or with the mountains. Some where the earth is of mud or clay, elsewhere it is rocky or golden or coppery. One may count the rays of the sun, but it is impossible to count the number of universes that exist. This creation is beginningless. In this city of Brahman, which is the infinite consciousness or consciousness in the space of one's heart, these universes arise and vanish again and again. But these are different from the one infinite consciousness. These creations, whether they are gross or subtle, whether established or disintegrating, are all garlands of the subtle elements which have all arisen from the infinite space of consciousness. Sometimes space gets established first, and the creator is said to be born of space. At other times, air gets established first, and at other times, fire, water, or earth, and the creator gets an appropriate title. From this creator's body, there arise words like Brahmana, the priest, etc. And these words become living beings with appropriate designations. Of course, all this is unreal, like the creations seen in a dream. Hence the question, how did all this arise in the one infinite consciousness, is immature and childish. This creation appears to take place on account of the intentions of the mind. This is certainly a mystery and a wonder. I have described all this to you only as an illustration of the truth. However, in this creation, there is no such order or sequence. This creation is nothing but the creation of the mind. This is the truth. The rest is but a fanciful description. On account of the succession of this creation and dissolution of this universe, a time scale is conceived of, from a moment to an aeon. But this universe is forever present in consciousness, just as sparks are ever present in a red-hot iron. In the pure vision of an enlightened person, all this is Brahman alone, not a world appearance. The repetition of creation and dissolution of infinite number of the universe, with the infinite variety of creators in them, is nothing but the fanciful perception of the ignorant and the deluded. The end of the story of Bhīma, Bhāsa, and Dṛḍha.